What you're seeing is the last acre or so of a small 9-acre burn on Sandhill that's undergoing restoration for gopher turtles and native vegetation. This is burning in a 2-year rough.
Just found another little teeny baby longleaf.
And in this 2-year rough, there's just enough needles cast and enough native grasses to carry the fire. You can see the other flank of the fire over on that side, and the two flanks are pulling together, and we keep bringing up the outside edges to keep the fire working inside the fire lines. And so far it's worked really well, and in about 3 or 4 weeks, after a little bit of rain, this place will be lush and green, and every bit of wildlife out here will be happy. A few minutes later now, the fire is finishing itself off here. You can see the two lines pulling themselves together along the fire lines. And besides a fair number of rabbits and a mouse and quite a few insects, there's this little guy, which of course, pygmy rattlesnake. Needless to say, he survived the burn, as do most of them, because they go to ground. Questionable whether I can hold this steady enough for everybody to see, and it's also questionable whether the magnification is sufficient for you to catch what's happening. But on these slow-moving backing and slow-moving flanking fires, the insects escape in front of them, and if you watch, you'll see various kinds of grasshoppers and other things hopping around out there, and they're hopping out across the fire line and away from the fire. And as I've been standing here for the last 10 or 15 minutes, hundreds and hundreds of them have come across, and quite a few have flown across. Right here, if you look carefully, you can see various grasshoppers. They're actually jumping across where the little pygmy rattlesnake is. And you can see other things crawling, coming out of the fire and escaping. Okay, so right down from where the little pygmy rattlesnake is, the one we were looking at a few minutes ago, you look right over here along this fire line. And I don't know that you can tell what you're looking at, but if you look right where that cricket's crawling, there's the pathway of where another snake, which we didn't see, crawled across the fire line, escaping. Yes, I know they're just insects, but the point that they come crawling out of the fire, hopping out of the fire, flying out of the fire, scurrying, you can just see how many there are. There's another one right by my foot. And unfortunately, there's just no way with a camera to make the point of how many hundreds of them there are coming across right now. I mean, you can just, let's see if I can watch them hopping. You can see the ground just moving with them, hundreds of them. And in nature, that's what's happening. Look right here. Watch the ground. You can see them all piled up right there, coming out of the fire. All right, so now we've walked back out into the burn, so you can get an idea of what the control burn does. And what you're seeing is an edge along one of the little hardwood patches where the fire traditionally will not carry when you do a prescribed burn, and you can see where it's gone up under there and stopped. The wildlife biologists will refer to this as a mosaic burn. You can also see this bit of area here where the fire kind of skipped it because there wasn't enough fuel Well, all of these areas are islands of safety for the things that live up here. And as long as you've got a backing fire, a slow moving fire, they take advantage of that and they ultimately survive. And that's the way nature made these things to happen, or that's how evolution has set things up to happen. And the point of this, the really big point, is that if this had been a forest fire where this area had been allowed to accumulate fuel, if we had basically pulled a California and let this area accumulate fuel for 10 or 15 or 20 years or longer as they've done, and then ultimately we have that fire that you are going to get during a drought situation in an area of the country where there's lightning. When that happens, rather than that slow moving low fire that you saw, and rather than having all these little islands of survival, and I'm walking toward one right now, where all the small things can survive. Here's another one right here. You can see some of this didn't burn right here. All sorts of small creatures will sit out the fire here. And of course, we've got gopher turtles up here on this sand hill, and lots of things will crawl down in the gopher turtle holes. But if we have that wildfire, rather than what you see, it will be a world-changing event. It will rush full on with the wind, what we call a head fire, and things do not have the opportunity to escape that you saw. And that's why we need to use prescribed fire, because it's what beyond the fact that it's what this ecosystem evolved with. Belabor the point, but I just thought I would show one more of those islands of survival that occur when you have a slow moving backing fire. And a lot of times it'll get where it doesn't have enough fuel and it'll go out. Whereas if you have an rushing head fire driven by wind in a drought condition with lots of fuels, right here, it would have burned straight through here. And I can guarantee you that there's rabbits and mice and snakes and all sorts of insects in this little small area. Because it was a slow moving fire, they had the opportunity to get in there and survive. 1 week later, same stand, actually the same time of the afternoon that those previous videos were taken, at the end of the fire last Friday. And here's just one example of what's happened already up on the sand hill. What you're seeing is a gopher tortoise hole. You can see quite a bit of activity from him, and you can see that the grass has already started to grow all up around here, and you can't really tell from the video, but if you look really close, you can see he's already been nipping the ends around his entrance off some of the new grass. Down this way we have a little bit more grass. And right here we have a clump of wiregrass, which is one of the most important species in a sandhill area for carrying fire and an indicator of a healthy ecosystem in this sort of area. The important thing to know about the grasses that we're seeing coming out and the fact that the gopher turtles are already eating them is that the biologists will tell us that if you have two new growths of grass, one grass that's been burned and one that's the same species in the same area, literally on the other side of the road, that's just coming up, that the grass in the area that's been burned, that the new shoots in that area are higher in nutrients and are preferred by the animals. You can see a whole bunch of stuff coming up right here. Are preferred by the animals. And it's not just gopher turtles, it's all of the animals that survive on grasses and forbs. And we could come back up here in a couple of 3 weeks and we get a little bit of rain, and the forbs and the legumes and all of that will go absolutely nuts up here. And contrary to what people might think, the fire doesn't kill, it rejuvenates. Probably no way that this video can do justice to what's happened out here after this burn. But needless to say, the rain lilies respond positively. And this is just one area. It just happens to be a particularly good area for them. You can just see them all out there. And they really don't look like anything until they bloom. You can see they're kind of look like grass until they bloom. You can see that they've come up all in this particular road. And one of the reasons they came up in this road the way they have done is because we allowed the fire to burn across this particular road. And you never would have known they were here if it hadn't been for the burning and allowing it to come into the road. And here we have, and you can see more down the road, particularly beautiful. Same place 2 weeks later. You can see how much green there is. We haven't had a lot of rain, so it's not greening up as fast as it might if there'd been a lot of rain, but there's enough.